Now, well, that's as far as I'm concerned with Asuka. Um, I'll move on to Rei. Uh, what is there to say about Rei Ayanami? I don't see the appeal in her character, to be honest with you. Her little discussion section will probably be the shortest out of all the four characters that I want to focus on. Um, there's nothing to say about Rei, and I think that's the point. She is a blank slate, literally. No character. She is like a robot. Almost no identity. She's mass-produced. She has little or no substance. I think a lot of people like her because she's very reserved, submissive. I want to assert that that's not because that's her character or her personality. That's just because she is hardly human. She is a sheltered creature. I do think that the fact that she goes through the series and develops a personality, develops humanity through her interactions with Shinji and other characters is remarkable in that sense, and I think that is noteworthy. But I've never really enjoyed Rei that much. I don't see the appeal to her really. She's certainly not as compelling as either Asuka or Shinji, and it's understandable, intentional, but yeah, there's not much to say about her. I'm not going to delve into her origins and the mythology about her being a clone of an angel or whatnot. It's all very confusing, and it doesn't really add anything to her. You know, she's almost a plot device in a lot of ways. I can't fault the writers for that necessarily. You know, it happens. It's hard to put a lot of personality into these characters, and given Rei what she's supposed to be, what she is, it's difficult. And I think she's meant to be this kind of blank slate, meant to be a parallel and opposite to both Asuka and Misato, which I will get to shortly. So that leads us into Misato. Misato is probably the most pragmatic of the main cast. Definitely my favorite character. She has her problems. You know, she has some security issues, some personal issues, but she doesn't let them get to her. You know, it's funny. It's only until I think the end of the series, episode 24 or 25, when we see one of those inner psychological episodes for Misato. But even then, it's not nearly as extensive as, say, Shinji or Asuka. You know, Misato is in a much better place than either of those characters, which is understandable. You know, she's an adult, almost 10 years older than either of them. Or is she older? Regardless, she's an adult. They're teenagers. You know, she's seen much more. She's been through much more. She's also the only character who seems to be cognizant of what exactly is going on. I get the feeling a lot of the characters don't even care that, you know, about what's happening. I mean, so much of the cast is intent on bringing about instrumentality or intent on destroying humanity. It's kind of ridiculous how depressing the series can be at times. I think with the exception of Kaji, Misato is one of the only characters who you can really sympathize with, who really, I think, understands what's happening and wants to stop Seele, wants to foil Gendo's plan, wants to stop the Angels. Her personal vendetta against Angels aside, I think she is probably the most noble character. Definitely goes to far lengths to try and save the world, essentially. She's the hero of the show. Shinji's not, and it's funny. Probably the best scene that comes to mind, or my most favorite scene of the entire series and the movie, is during the end of Evangelion when, right before Misato's death, when she is speaking to Shinji, you know, trying to persuade him to go on, to keep on living, to keep fighting, and Shinji simply he can't. You know, he hates himself so much, and what the whole exchange between the two is incredible. You know, I love that scene so much. I think it's the most powerful scene. And it really is the culmination of a relationship that is probably the central relationship of the series, you know. Greater than that of Shinji and his father, greater than that of Shinji and Asuka. Shinji and Misato was the backbone from the very first episode. It's the thing that the audience could latch onto. You know, I'm a firm believer in the fact that a good story has good central relationship, a good central core, you know, a human element that we can relate to. And that element in Evangelion, I believe, is the relationship between Shinji and Misato. Now, that relationship is muddled in a lot of ways. What are they to each other? In fact, like what really are they? You know, is Misato a mother figure to Shinji? Is she a lover? Is she a sex symbol? Is she a friend? Is she a big sister? A guardian? Is she his supervisor? You know, his military superior? What is she? And in reality, she's all of these things. You know, and it's very complex. You know, she's not one thing to Shinji. He's not one thing to her. And I think that scene really comes out. You know, there is a bond between these two characters. Misato had problems with her father, just like Shinji. Misato is very much like Shinji. You know, I think she's one of the few people who understands him, who gives him his space, who can relate to him. You know, and a lot of this, a good portion of the series is devoted to Misato wondering, is she worthy of being Shinji's guardian? Is she worthy of being with Shinji? So both characters do have a certain amount of self-loathing. They both have their difficulties. They both hate themselves, but they both go on. You know, Misato succeeds more than Shinji does. You know, she doesn't give up, and she really just shines through. You know, she's a great character. And I want to mention her dub, her voice actress, Alison Keith, I believe, does a great job. You know, on Misato. I haven't watched Evangelion in Japanese since I think the very first time I saw it. Ever since then, I've just watched it in English. But I think it just really grows on you in terms of her character. So she's definitely one of the best characters in the show, if not the best. The one character I can always root for, you know, because all these characters with their personal agendas, their vendettas, their little goals, their sneaky kind of their goals, their underhanded tactics, you know, and there's Misato, and her hands aren't entirely clean, you know. She's not innocent herself, but I think she's the one character that the audience can say, you know what, this character is the hero, this character is noble, this character wants to do good, do right by the world, by humanity, by all these other people. And I think she does a good job. You know, she tries her hardest, but I mean, what can you do when you're fighting against these cosmic forces, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. But yeah, definitely Misato is probably my favorite character in the series. Very well written, definitely a top contender. Now that I've discussed those characters, actually, I want to give some time to Kaoru Nagisa. Kaoru is an interesting character. In the original series, he only comes out in one episode. You know, episode 24, which I believe should be the last episode anyone who watches the TV series watches, but I'll get to that later. Kaoru is almost... he is given an incredible amount of importance for that one episode. If you look at all the promotional materials for Evangelion, Kaoru has a central role in all of them. You look at a poster, there's Kaoru. You look at merchandising, there's Kaoru. You look at the manga, the novels, whatever else has been written or created about Evangelion, Kaoru is in all of them. He has this prevalent presence throughout the entire franchise. And it's interesting, again, because he only comes out for one episode. He's so important, but he only comes out in one episode, and then he only appears for maybe, 2 or 3 scenes in the finale of the end of Evangelion? So how can a character who appears in one episode and a handful of other scenes can become so popular and have so much import? And honestly, it's obvious. You know, it's what Kaoru represents. He is the last angel. I think that's a twist, obviously, in that episode, is that Kaoru is the final angel that Nerve must defeat. But he's also one of Shinji's true friends. He's the only character who is free of those social reservations, who's able to connect to Shinji and say, Shinji, I love you. Who knows if it's romantic, who knows if it's platonic, but he understands Shinji to an extent. And I just want to mention that last episode, episode 24, is another one of my great favorites. It's so weighty. Everything leads up to that one moment when Shinji is clutching Kaoru in the Ava's fist. At that point, Asuka is almost dead. In a coma practically. Rei is nowhere to be. Rei had just killed herself and then been brought back. All of much of Tokyo 3 has been decimated. Many of Shinji's friends, Toji, Keisuke, most of them are gone. So Shinji's alone, and he's facing this one person, the one person who says that the first person who said that he's ever loved him. And Shinji has to make a choice. Am I going to kill this? Am I going to kill him, or am I going to allow him to destroy humanity? And interesting enough, Shinji doesn't have to make the choice. It's Kaoru. Kaoru, despite being an angel, as a human, he understands that it's not worth destroying humanity. He lends humanity a hand. I want to draw a reference to Jesus Christ, or as the Messiah. Kaoru is this messianic figure to humanity. At the very end, he could very well have destroyed everyone. He could have instigated a third impact and destroyed everything, but he doesn't. He willingly chooses to give his own life, to sacrifice the life or the potential of the angels, and give it to humanity, because he sees humanity as something worth protecting, as something, humanity with their limited lifespan has only one thing: the future. It only has hope, and Kaoru recognizes this. In a way, he recognizes exactly what humanity strives for, and he gives himself up for that. So it's probably one of the greatest moments of the series, and definitely very noteworthy. When you think about it like that, you can see why Kaoru is such an important character, both to Shinji and the entire series as a whole. He is pivotal, and it's fitting that he is the final angel, the final opponent that Shinji has to face before, the end of the world as we know it. But that being said, now that I've discussed the characters, I want to spend some time talking about the show itself. I've said before, I really like Evangelion, but it has its flaws, and I am critical of it. I've seen it 2 or 3 times, I think, in the past, maybe even 4 times. I'm not really sure. Occasionally I'll watch the director's commentary on the ADV DVDs, which are interesting. If you can check those out, I would recommend it. But in general, Evangelion is very interesting. I realized that at the time, the director Anno was going through depression. He wasn't in the best mindset, and it comes through in the story. I realized they were having the studio Gainax was having financial difficulties, was having budget and time constraints, and it shows in the series. But one thing I want to comment on that was deliberate in the part of the development team was this emphasis on the psychoanalysis. Evangelion is usually championed as one of the first series that delved into the psychology of its characters. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a great thing. I think that emphasis on character is great. I think fleshing out the characters is a wonderful thing. But I think the series is incredibly heavy-handed with it. So much so that psychoanalysis becomes what the show is about. The first half of the series it's pretty simple. Get in a giant robot. These teenagers get in giant robots and fight otherworldly monsters. And then the latter part of the series, everything begins to break down. The characters just go crazy. They fall into comas. They become catatonic. They lose everything they've hold dear. It's like a train wreck in slow motion, the last half of the series. And you see more and more of the episodes devoted to these kind of internal conflicts of the characters represented by, for example, Shinji and the train. Shinji is on this train constantly. His inner self, his younger self, his better self, in fact, is telling him, why are you always running away? And Shinji refuses him. Asuka has a similar thing with the doll with her mother's corpse. I think there's even an episode devoted to it with Rei, when the angel tries to make contact with Rei, when the episode where Rei sacrifices herself to save Shinji, and the angel's communicating with Rei, and we get this long drawn out scene between the two with these ridiculously pompous questions, pretentious questions, what am I, why do I exist, etc., etc., etc. It gets extremely heavy-handed. even the last two episodes of Evangelion, the series 24, 25, one of the reasons, well, I'll get to them eventually, but those two episodes are devoted to the psychoanalysis. It's kind of ridiculous. You can tell I'm not a fan of it. In small doses, yes, it works well. The Rebuild films, which I won't discuss in this video, but I'll probably make a short video in the future for the Rebuild of Evangelion series. God, I'm so grateful for that series because they devote maybe, a few minutes to one or two of those scenes in the entirety of the two films so far, and it's very welcome. I mean, this psychoanalysis, I think there's one episode where one of the angels is invading Asuka's mind, and we get this extremely long scene of this looping image of Asuka turning around and saying, "Who am I?" or something along those lines, with different color palettes, and it goes on forever. I mean, I hate to exaggerate, but it goes on. It is ridiculous. It goes on for this indefinite amount of time, and you're just there watching, thinking, why are you wasting my time with this? I mean, I understand that there were budget constraints. I understand there were time constraints, but it grates on you. It really does grate on you because this series has a lot of potential in terms of its mythology. This series has so much potential in terms of its mythology. It's very interesting. I watched the show more because of the angels, more because of its biblical references to say Adam, Lilith, etc. And I know that it's come out in interviews that a lot of it's superficial, but even still, it's very interesting to watch them make these references. It's cool to think about it and talk about it, and it's a shame that the mythology of the series is brushed aside, ignored for the sake of these characters, for the sake of this psychoanalysis. And to be honest, I couldn't care less. The series beats your head over it. It beats you over the head with this psychoanalysis, the psychology of these characters. It's like, I get it. I get the Shinji Asuka. I get that they're screwed up. And to not use a certain curse. I get that they're screwed up. I get that they're in a horrible place mentally, emotionally. I get it. I don't need to be told that every episode. I don't need for the majority of the episodes to be devoted to seeing this. I think it takes up way too much time. I think it detracts from the show in general. I'm one of the proponents that Evangelion would be a much better show if it just focused more on the robots, the aliens. I mean, you got a lot of cool stuff there that you can explore while also keeping the psychoanalysis in. But God, it overstates its welcome. And that brings me to another thing about the mythology about Evangelion. Evangelion straddles the line between, I think, pretentious and artsy, artistic. That's a common problem with modernistic works, where you do something out of the box, you do something unconventional, and the audience has to really wonder: are you doing this because you have a real reason to do it, or are you doing it just to push the envelope for the sake of it, to make your work artsy? I don't think Evangelion is necessarily pretentious. I think it can be seen as such, and I don't think it's unwarranted to see it as such. Personally, I don't think it is. But you look at a lot of it is superficial. A lot of it is kind of cryptic, vague, and you get the sense of wondering, what was the intent? What was the intent behind this show? Why did the show have to be so vague? Why did the show have to be so cryptic? Why couldn't the show have just come out and told me some of these things? Evangelion likes to just show you some really strange, unearthly imagery and say, oh, hey, what's this, or what's this thing got to do? And they're all the names are arbitrary almost. Hey, what's this embryonic Adam and Gendo ingested, and how exactly does he go through with instrumentality? I mean, how is he going to meet with his wife? I do understand how it was going to work. They were all going to become one single entity, one single consciousness. No need to explain that to me, but it seems like Evangelion tries too hard to hide it, to say, oh, here's some biblical references. Let's muck it up. Let's keep everything kind of hidden away, kind of cryptic, and their audience can spend more of their time trying to deduce it rather than we just tell the story well and make it satisfying. Evangelion doesn't even present you with all the pieces of the puzzle. What are the origins of Adam and Lilith? What are the origins of the angels? You know, you have to consult an outside reference. What, the PlayStation 2 video game? You have to consult outside references to understand what the hell is going on in Evangelion. And that is one of the marks of a bad story. I should never have to consult something outside of the series proper to understand what the hell is going on in the series. I shouldn't. Everything that I need should be in the series, even if it's cryptic, even if it's hidden, even if it's vague. I should be able to understand everything that's going on with the series alone. If I can put the pieces together, that's great. That's great. And one of the series that does a much better job at this, that I hope to do a discussion on, is Razafon. Razafon is a great series, and man, one of my personal favorite animes ever. Very similar to Evangelion in certain aspects, and it'll be interesting to talk about the parallels between them in that particular video, or discussion if I get to it in the future. But anyway, yeah, so I think Evangelion, God, it drops the ball in that regard, drops the ball in the mythology. You know, it presents us with an interesting mythology, and it says, hey, this is great. And what gets me is that a lot of people praise it for that. They praise it for being cryptic, they praise it for being vague, they praise it for being hidden. Being pretentious and convoluted does not mean that your story is good. It works in some cases. It does work in some cases. But it does work to make the audience think. But sometimes it's too much. And sometimes it's unnecessary. Sometimes it comes off too much. And it's totally unnecessary. And Evangelion suffers from this. Definitely suffers from this. So, believe me, I'm as critical of it as many of you are out there. And as much as I like it, I can admit that it has some definite problems in terms of its mythology and how it tells its story. That pretty much leads me to episodes 24 and 25. I mentioned before that these are my least favorite episodes. And for good reason. These episodes are trash. I'm sorry. You can get down and tell me all your mumbo jumbo about how they're full of subtle and enriching meaning, how they're about Shinji rejecting instrumentality, how they're about Shinji coming to terms with himself. But really, let's be honest here, these were definitely not the ending of the series. They were not meant to be a conclusion. There is no build-up. The final episode before them, episode 24. Oh, excuse me, the last episode, 25, 26, I'm sorry. The episode before them, 24, with Kaoru, it ends, and then episode 25, what? Like a jump. Like, there's no little build-up. Now, sure, instrumentality was alluded to throughout the series. This is true. There are many references to it. You can see it coming. You know it's going to be the final big thing that's going to happen in the show. It's going to be its climax. But the actual way the story is told, the build-up to that moment is absent. How can you justify that? Episodes 25 and 26, how can you justify that? They just throw you into it. Oh, hey, look, here's Shinji. He's in his own mind dealing with this. Now they're in an alternate reality of things that could have been. Why does this have any significance? Why is it relevant? What actually happened to the characters? What happened to Shinji? What happened to Asuka? What happened to Misato? Where is it? What happened? What led up to this? What happened to Nerve? What happened to Sailor? What happened to the world, humanity? These episodes don't give it to you. They're vague, they're cryptic, and you're expected to buy that as a person who's followed the series up until then? I don't believe that. You can't. You cannot buy that. It's a shame. I do realize that there were budget constraints, there were time constraints. That's what had to be scraped up. That's my personal belief. I don't know the details. I don't want to say that it wasn't the idea. Maybe it was. And yet, if you watch the director's cut of episode 24, the preview for the next episode are animation frames, storyboard sketches of End of Evangelion, of scenes from End of Evangelion. So obviously, End of Evangelion must have been the intended ending for the series, the intended episode 25 and 26. And that's not what we got, which is fine. I can understand that. It's rectified. You can go watch End of Evangelion, and I recommend you to watch End of Evangelion. Whenever I recommend people to watch the series, I always say, skip the last two episodes, watch End of Evangelion, save yourself the trouble, save yourself the time, watch something that actually builds it up. And End of Evangelion does a great job of that. It flows, it's organic, it picks up picks up, from where Kaworu killed, basically gave himself up, picks up, shows us what happened to Nerve, shows us the conflict. It's climactic. Now, mind you, the latter half of End of Evangelion does delve into the psychoanalysis. We do get a lot of kind of annoying these long scenes that deal with Shinji, struggling with the choice to either allow the instrumentality to take place or to reject it. But it is so much more bearable, and actually probably better done than what we see in episodes 20, 25, and 26. Of course, it's preference. If you enjoy those episodes, all the power to you, but I personally don't. I see them as filler. I see them as a poor substitute to what the true ending of the series should have and could have been, which is, I suppose, End of Evangelion. So in that sense, I'm not a big fan of episodes 25 and 26 at all. What can I say about them that I didn't just say? It may sound that I hate them, like I'm biased, and I don't hate them, but I just, it's something, you have to draw a line at some point, and you can like the show, you can say that the show is meaningful and subtle and all of that, and I would agree with you to some extent, but it goes about it the wrong way in a lot of cases. So, yeah, you know what, it does what it does, and it's not perfect. But those two episodes, you can make excuses, I'm sorry. I understand why it happened, but at the end of the day, those are the two episodes that are going to be the ending of the series, and someone who watches them, I hate for someone to watch the series, hear so much about it, and they make it through the first 24 episodes, and man, they're probably at their wit's end, and then they see those last two episodes and think to themselves, what the hell, man? Why did I just waste all this time watching the series for that type of ending? It's not satisfying, And I'm a firm believer that a good story is satisfying. It's meaningful and satisfying. That it tells the story well. Meaning be damned. You can have the most meaningful, most literary story ever, but if it's boring, if it doesn't tell itself well, then it's garbage. Then why are you even bothering? There has to be a balance between the two, and Evangelion doesn't meet that balance. It doesn't find it. Well, regardless, that's my mini review, I suppose, of the series, of its latter half. Overall, I do enjoy Evangelion a lot. Like I said, it's a series I can watch over and over again. It never gets boring. Interesting enough, despite its problems, despite the fact that I've grown and I get tired of Shinji and Asuka whining and this and that. I do watch it. I think the angel designs are great. I think the robots are designed great. I think it deals with a lot of cool ideas. It's a shame that the mythology doesn't get expanded on. Actually, I said I would make another video for the Rebuild series, but I think I'll discuss it here because there's not a lot to discuss in terms of Rebuild as of yet. There are only two movies that have been completed at this point. The first two films, and the latter two films, who knows when they'll come out and what they'll entail. But I will mention that I think the Rebuild films, as of yet, they have their flaws too. The pacing is very much faster than the actual series. You lose a lot of character development. I want to make it clear that I don't recommend the Rebuild films as a substitute for the original series. And by no means are they a substitute. Even though supposedly the intention of the films is for a new generation of Eva fans, but in reality, if you like Evangelion, you have to watch the original series. The Rebuild films aren't going to act or serve as a substitute, and in fact, I think they're better off as a supplement. After you've watched the original TV series, you can watch it again, End of Evangelion, and then you can watch the Rebuild series. And the Rebuild series, it takes some good steps forward. Despite the fact that the pacing is a little off, and the character development is lackluster. Again, it depends on the viewer knowing who these characters are. You already know Asuka, you already know Shinji, you already know Rei, you already know Misato, etc., etc., etc. So it really depends on someone to fill in the blanks for themselves. And that being said, I think the series does a lot of good. We've seen progress. I said before that I think the majority of the conflict of the TV series would be resolved if Shinji and Asuka just talk to each other. And we get hints of that in the second Rebuild film. There's a scene where Asuka almost levels with Shinji, and they just talk. and it doesn't get quite to where I would want it to be personally, but it's a step forward in the right direction. You know, you see these characters do more. You know, they reach out, they become better. There's a brighter light at the end of the tunnel. You know, if the original TV series was just dark, pitch black, like we're falling, and there's no way to save ourselves. Rebuild has it's almost like a chance for redemption for the original series. There's almost this chance that spiritual redemption, like this time, like this go around, Shinji will save everyone. That Shinji will pull through, even though he failed at the end of Evangelion. This time he won't fail. That he will save everybody. That there will be a change. Some people have there's a theory that the Rebuild series is a sequel, given Kaworu's cryptic, handful of lines. But yeah, I don't want to speculate on that. I personally don't believe it is a sequel. Maybe it is. That would be interesting. Give more credence to the fact that you should just watch the original TV series first. Personally, I'm hoping that the climactic battle is between Kaoru and Shinji, both in their respective Evas in space. That would be a fan dream, I suppose. But I think the series is doing a better job. Probably going to have the same problems with its mythology, but nonetheless, I think it's decent. If you've seen the TV series and you watch Rebuild, I think you owe it to yourself to immerse yourself in those films, and then maybe when it's all said and done, we'll get some closure to it as a series. That's about it for Rebuild. There is Mari, pretty unremarkable character, kind of crazy, action-hungry girl. What does she have? I will say that the final battle of the second Rebuild film is really cool, and that Shinji, we see Shinji for the first time, I guess, do something for himself. He takes a further step than he ever did in the series, and it's very interesting. You see a lot of things that the show hinted at. The beast mode for Eva Unit 2. We see Shinji himself, through his own will, instigate Third Impact. Very interesting stuff that I think the original series alluded to, but we never got to really see or touch on, and I think Rebuild's going to take the mythology maybe a step further, and I really hope that they expand upon it and that they flesh it out as it deserves to be. But that being said, I think I pretty much exhausted what I wanted to discuss about Evangelion. I realize this is a long video, but I think the show deserves it. I think there's a lot to discuss about the show. And despite its flaws, despite that a lot of people may not enjoy it, I think it deserves a watch if you're a fan of anime, if you're a fan of movies and film in general. I think Evangelion is a classic for a reason, despite its polarizing nature. But I think I like it because it's grounded. That characters don't look ridiculous. They don't have these outlandish character designs. The series has some fan service, but it's never necessarily gratuitous. Well, maybe in Rebuild it is, but not in the original TV series, as far as I could tell. It's a show that is maybe not super mature. It's defeatist, it's depressing, but I think there's a lot of good in it too. Anyway, as I said before, I may do another discussion on Razafan. Razafan is perhaps what Evangelion should have and could have been in terms of a mature series of anime, and I think that would be interesting to discuss the parallels, because personally Razafan I think is much better than Evangelion. I like Evangelion more. Interesting, I like Evangelion more than Razafan, but Razafan is a better series, and Razafan does things. It suffers from some of the same problems of being too convoluted, but it gives you the pieces. It gives you the pieces. It explains itself a lot better than Evangelion does. But that being said, I think I'll draw this discussion to a close. If you have opposing arguments or anything like that, post a comment. Feel free to discuss. Just please make sure it's constructive. Make sure that everybody respects each other. I don't want to incite anything. This was meant for me to just put something out there, maybe get something to talk about Evangelion, to dissect it a little further, and just enjoy it. Relive this series. I think it deserves to be talked about. It's still relevant. We still have Rebuild. It's a good series that I think still has a lot to offer. And we'll see in the future what next I discuss. I mean, beyond Razafon, there might be other things. If you're interested, just keep an eye out, and maybe I'll come out with something that's cool or that's relevant. So, thanks a lot for listening to this. Goodbye.